Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sami, here with co-host Angela Belford. And today we are joined by a very special guest, LaDawnya Faulkner. LaDawnya, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Sami. Thank you, ladies, for having me. Super excited to be with you.
I am so excited for this conversation. Today, we're going to be diving into fresh starts, continuing our January theme, looking at this new year, new you nonsense. I'm just kidding. But this concept of sort of what could be like starting over or just starting at any point. And so without spoiling the ending of things, I guess, LaDawnya, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Talk about where you are now, and then we'll go back here in a moment and talk about where you've come from and part of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So today I'm sitting at the Center for Nonprofits in our shop, Lost Ozark Dawn Community Heritage, and we are working towards sharing our love of sewing and the benefits that can come from it with our community. So I'm here today doing that, and it's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
And LaDawnya and I used to work in the same building, work for same company-esque within all of that same corporate structure and whatnot. So we go kind of way back, it feels like now.
And it's definitely been years.
Yeah,
which seems odd, but we can say that.
I know time is a funny thing. And so the journey that brought you to Lost Ozark Dawn Community Heritage, I think, is just really beautiful and can bring out a lot for people, that they can get some hope to see where you've been and where you are now. So why don't we just jump in there? Tell us a little bit about that journey and your story, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Sure. So November 6th of 2019, that was the day that someone said, "We're worried about you." And I took that nugget of love and care and went and put myself into rehab for alcohol addiction. So that was in 2019. I was there for 45 days. I came home and my life was not there anymore, right? So my husband at the time, he's now since left us and passed, was struggling with his alcohol addiction, and I was just in the wave with him, just like going along the path with him until I went to rehab. And when I came home, he was in the hospital. My house, everything was not sanitary and safe to live in. So I, for sure, literally pulled up a dump truck and threw away almost everything I owned. And then I got an apartment by myself because I made the choice to put myself and my sobriety before I put my husband's health and well-being. It was a very hard decision to make, but one that I had to make for myself. So he was still in and out of rehabs in the hospital, and I was working my job and, trying to get back in the swing of things. And then COVID hits. So being sober in the world is scary and hard, but then you add a pandemic on top of it. And holy cow, didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was coming or going, what was going on. And then after that was just a snowball of loss. Lost my credit, lost my home, lost my cars, lost my husband, lost my dog. It was just lost, a whole bunch of it. And I found myself just going, what am I doing? What am I doing in this world? And I have all this guilt for the choices that I have now made and have made previously. But what can I do that'll help me feel good about myself, and that'll be something good and positive in my life and in other people's lives? that I can do. And it kind of slowly morphed into Lost Ozark Dawn Community Heritage. Um, the name has nothing to do with sewing, right? Um, I sat with my brother and talked a whole lot about the massive amounts of loss that I had gone through, and the choices I made to stay sober. And we came up with the name Lost Ozark Dawn because being lost isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes you find yourself in a really cool place or doing something fun that you may not have thought about doing on your own. So getting lost isn't always bad. Being home after being married to the military and moving around the United States and everywhere, it was so great to be back home in the Ozarks and just to be here. And dawn, my name's LaDawnya. It's dawn like sunrise. Every dawn is a new day. So I can be lost at home every day, helping my community, helping myself, and helping others to not feel the way that I felt, which was totally lost.
That is so beautiful. When was that in the timeline? So we had November 6th, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
When was this starting?
I kind of just lump it all into that date because right after, COVID hit the first part of 2020.
Yep.
The bankruptcy, the house loss, and all that happened within 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then 21, and then in 21, Michael passed.
Mm-hmm.
It was in 21 that I started Lost Ozark Dawn.
Okay.
And then in 24, just last year, I created Lost Ozark Dawn Community Heritage. So I want people to feel like this is their third space. We have home, which is our comfort. We have work, which is our second comfort. But where do we go outside of home and work to be comfortable and feel accepted? So I want this to be that third place. Anybody interested in sewing anybody in looking for something positive to do with their hands and their head and their heart, I have this room for them. We're going to come in here. They come in here. We're going to talk sewing. We'll talk about the things that's happened in our lives because they deserve time and attention. But sometimes we get really stuck in that groove of overthinking it. And we just need a break from it. And where does that break come from? So sewing is my answer.
I love that. Well, and you said, you lump it all into that one date, but interestingly enough, and for people listening to draw out, it wasn't one day. It was actually 2 years. And that time period, I'm sure in it feels like forever. It feels like this is never going to end. It feels like I can't even see to another side. Looking back, you actually can say like, wow, it was kind of just 2 years. That's not even that long in the scheme of things. And yet when you're in that place, time doesn't work in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely felt very frazzled. I didn't feel like I could catch my breath from one happening to another happening. It was like, I've told people I feel like it all happened at once. It just all happened at once. And that sounds silly because it can't all happen at once. But that small little time frame, you're right. It's really hard to go from one loss to another loss and hold your head up and still be able to like breathe and move forward and be productive and positive. It was over a couple of years, but that's a lot for any one person to really be able to have happen and process it and then move on to the next whatever life throws at you type thing.
Well, it's interesting because here we really embrace the messy middle, and it started because I had a therapist. My therapist years ago said, nobody wants to talk about the messy middle. Everybody wants to wait until the story is like, ta-da, we made it. And so like I think at the time I was talking about the idea of like, I have this very, public social life, and I'm all on social media, and then I'm going through this thing that's really hard and really difficult. And she's like, that's very normal. It's normal. People don't like to share when we're in it, in the messy middle, and we don't know that we're for sure going to make it to the other side. It's very, very, it takes a lot of will, and I think our body fights against it because it feels protective to hold that space. And I'm not saying you have to tell the whole world everything, because there's also people that are on social media and woe is me constantly.
Mhm.
And so what we try to do is really want to give hope to those people that are in the messy middle and that you haven't gotten to the other side. Dawn hasn't come. It's maybe still
Mhm.
dark,
Right.
right? We know it's darkest before the dawn. And so if it is still dark, if you are still coming from a season of loss, or you in the midst of a season of loss, we really want to just create space to be okay. We have some very uncomfortable conversations here where I just am like, I don't want to tell people that I struggle with this thing.
Right.
But we try to. So that's why we're trying to like pull that out a little bit, is
Mhm.
because we're like, oh, 2 years, that it was just nothing. And you're right. 3 years later, 2 years feels like nothing. But man, when you're in it, even the idea of somebody taking 45 days off of their job to go to rehab feels like the end of the world. I imagine people I use the Indiana Jones, when he had to take a step into the chasm and there was no bridge there. That first step, when you don't know that you're going to make it across the chasm, it feels like you're going to die. I think also the other thing, besides we give hope to the messy middle, I want to give hope to people that are on that and needing to take that first step and feeling like, I will never get through. If I start crying, I can't tell you how many people have told me, if I start crying, I'm not sure I'll stop. And I'm
Right.
like, well, I promise you will. She will be dehydrated eventually.
Right.
And so, are there key steps in that journey that really kind of like got you to the next layer? So if you imagine you're talking to somebody that's still in that dark season of loss, what are some things that helped you, maybe some tools that you used? How did you rebuild community? How did you rebuild all of those things?
Well, I first had to give myself some grace.
Mm.
And I'm not a bad person. I just had some bad habits or made some bad choices. And I found myself in rehab thinking, I am never going to laugh again. That's
Mm.
it. My life's over. I'm just never going to laugh again. And that wasn't true. I started laughing in rehab, and I made a mental note to myself like, hey, I'm having a good time laughing. I was wrong. So giving ourselves grace when we feel that pressure, whatever the trauma or the trigger is. I haven't fallen off of the wagon. I don't, and I'm not willing to test it. Right. I've lost so much that I am not going to even test the waters on that stuff. But you have to love yourself and put yourself first. And that's very selfish, especially when you're a giver. Sami, I know you're a giver. We've worked in the same, and you smiled and you were always kind to everybody. And I could always tell you tried to find the little sparkle at the end of the hallway, Um, not
What's
every,
funny about that though is that LaDawnya's office was at the end of the hallway from where I worked, and there was a candy bowl there. So when you said find the sparkle, my first thought was that glass candy bowl. Actually, and I was like, yes, I did try to find it. And I was like, no, the person. Anyway, sorry. Had to share
yeah,
my little giggle.
we did. We always had chocolate.
Hey, when you
And
work in the HR department, you got to bring people in.
that's right. Nobody really wants to talk to you, but they're really the most important people for you to talk to.
They really are.
Them and your IT folks, I think. But there's always that scare, and you're right. Indiana Jones stepping out into the dark on the bridge that was there. How do you know if you're going to make it? Well, you don't, and you just try to have faith in your own self, and then you rely on little bits and nuggets from the people who support you and love you and care about you, because believe it or not, there's more people than you think of that do think about you and what you're doing. And I have been told that I have helped others, which is great. That's what I love to do. I like to help people. Um, Even if it's just a little shift in their way of thinking, or maybe nobody has told them to give themselves some grace, right? Life is hard and we've all been traumatized. And how are we going to get through it without creating an addiction, you know? So, first of all, I would tell them, give yourself grace and take a deep breath and know that you are a good person and you have something to offer this world and your family and your friends. And when you start focusing on yourself and taking care of yourself, it's like the airplane, right? Put your oxygen mask on first, then you can help everyone else. If you're not healthy, if you're not in a good headspace, you can't help other people. And something that made me think of something a minute ago is I don't want to go through this life as a victim. I'm not a victim. I am smart. Some bad things have happened, but that doesn't make me a victim. That makes me a fighter. And as long as I can overcome little, and let's say little, tiny little things, then I'm being productive and positive.
I love that.
I wonder what makes that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for this, but there are some people who I don't want to be a victim. And there are some people, I'm not going to say that they are actively choosing the opposite, but the thought never crossed their mind that I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be a victim,
Mm-hmm.
which then puts them in that place. I don't know. I'm wondering what makes that different. Now I want to go dig in and do some research to be like, what sparks somebody to feel that and to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's
I don't
interesting
know.
you say that because I've been curious about similar kind of concept because I meet LaDawnya, you and I don't know each other, but I have background where I was as a child experienced homelessness and hunger and all of those things, and I use that as the rocket fuel for my life.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that once I turned 18, my life had sucked plenty because of other people's choices, and I was not going to let it suck anymore based on my own choices. I will tell you the hardest forgiveness work I did is when I had to forgive myself for the choices that I made that did make my life suck. That actually was way worse than because other people I could give them like, oh, well, they were young. Oh, well, they had had trauma. I gave them all kinds of excuses. And
Mm-hmm.
the hardest work I did was having to give myself. So I love that your first thing is give yourself grace
Right.
because it really was, even though I decided I didn't want other people's decisions to make my life suck, I also hadn't healed from my trauma. It took a long time. And so there were things that were just like, I didn't even recognize that I was causing my life to suck, right?
Right.
Until that. But then so that's one thing where I use that people use the trauma from their childhood to cause them to want to be better. And then there's the second group of people that are like, I I was traumatized, and so I will gonna be a victim, and I am going to like. There's nothing I can do. There's no hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's no. I'm insanely curious about that concept. The closest I have come is people being able to experience something that is different. So when I see people who's like, my mom was on welfare. My grandma was on welfare. My great grandma never had her driver's license. Like this is all of my aunts, all of my. If you never see anything different, then I think it's harder to see something different for yourself.
Right.
And but besides that, I'm with you, Sammy. There is something. It is always. I've even seen it within the same family where one sibling uses it as the like reason why they're going to choose addiction
Mm-hmm.
and fall into those things, the kind of results. And then other family members use it as the rocket fuel. So I don't know if
Yeah.
we'll ever get that answer.
That's okay. LaDawnya, I want to circle back to something that I know has some deeper meaning to you, but I don't know that Angela or anybody else listening does. Why sewing? When you start a nonprofit to help other people and to connect with others, I mean, the world's your oyster. You could pick any kind of thing. It could be anything. So why sewing?
Well, I mean, I love gardening.
Mhm.
and I like to cook, but I have a chef in the family, and sometimes it's better, but not usually. Sewing was around. My grandmother sewed. Back in the day, it was a necessity, not a hobby. And I remember watching my grandmother sew, and my mom sews. She's got her place there in Pea Ridge. It's 1,500 square feet for a sewing room. Um, it just was there. It was there. I got my first sewing machine when I graduated high school. I still have it today. Um, and it's just something that I had that I could just close the door and cut, and iron as much as I wanted, which ironing your clothes sounds miserable, right? Nobody wants to iron their clothes anymore these days. But to iron some fabric is really relaxing in a way. Um, I don't know. There was just a lot of things that the sewing, when I started giving it my attention, my day was better. My personality was better, because when you're going through all that stuff in one time, having people around you who's going to put up with you when you're a hot mess is a big help, right? And not everybody has that. So I'm very grateful for the people that I have in my life. Because I would have probably just slunk off in a cave and, did that. But I didn't. I had a great support community, family, friends, and that kind of thing. But the sewing was here. The machine was in my room for, I'm 48 on Saturday. I'll be
Oh.
49 on Saturday.
Mhm.
So I've had it for, 30 years, and it was there. And I just decided that I can't afford to go and buy all paint supplies or, whatever hobby you think of. Gardening is just seasonal, and that kind of thing. So I took what I had in my possession and I started just creating with it and using it. And it just grew because, sewing has always been part of my life. I remember hand sewing quilts with my grandma down in Scott County in Waldron back in the day. And I still have that quilt too. And it's very precious to me because we did it by hand. And if there's a will, there's a way. She couldn't sit at the sewing machine and show me how to sew. So we did it by hand. And, you know, um, I had a lot of stuff. My mom had that room, and that was my oyster. I'd walk in that room and there's
Mm.
just every amount of fabric and any machine you wanted to use, serger, sewing machine, and long arming, embroidery, the whole shebang, right? Because that was her hobby. Um,
That's neat.
but it was there, and it was easily accessible. There's my answer.
Well, and I would think I think about mental health, and when I had my nervous breakdown, I was 24. I I liked work. And I didn't have a job at the time, and so I still to this day tell people, like, you sometimes need a cow job, which is just a job that you can go and you have to concentrate and you have to give it your focus, and it lets you kind of use it as a little bit of an escape. And so as you're describing sewing, I'm thinking, oh, there is something about this that is a little bit like the way I describe cow jobs. There's like, you have to be meticulous. So you have to pay attention when you're cutting and you have to pay attention when you're sewing. And so it almost is like, it's a neat distraction. It sounds like a neat distraction escapism. It's also a pretty inexpensive hobby. I mean, if you hand sew, obviously sewing machines. I love
Mhm.
that you're here in Northwest Arkansas as a nonprofit that people that don't have a sewing machine could come there. Do you teach classes on how so if somebody says, I've always wanted to, my grandma sewed, but
Yep,
I don't know how, is that something that you guys offer?
we do. We do. So we were doing a make two, take one. And that was once a month where we would invite people to come in, use our machines, use our fabrics, make a project, keep one for yourself to be like, look what I did. Woo! And then the other one we donate back out into the community to help our community out. Right. So
Mm.
that was free. So with all of the storms and stuff, we were displaced.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended up here. We went from experimental house to the Center for Nonprofits. We were in the basement. It was a little creepy, but we moved up to the first floor. And our schedule's just been kind of off for a little bit. We're going to get back to the make two take ones, but we have decided to open Mondays up for people to come in and just sew. Just come in and sew. If you don't have anything, work on I'm going to give you something to work on, to start practicing and get the feel of the machine and stuff. And you can be very meticulous when you're sewing, but you really don't have to be meticulous.
Mhm.
And there's 100 different ways, maybe not 100. There's a few different ways to put a binding on. It doesn't have to be my way is the right way or your way is the right way. It's whatever works best for you to get the results that you're looking for. And if you take that and put it into your life, that's very helpful too.
Mm.
Right. So
Love that.
there's not, I don't know, there's not a book to tell us how to be adults. There's not a book to tell us how to be parents or kids. And there's not a right and a wrong way to go about life. There's this works good. This works good. Oh, look, that works better. So it's just a trial and error, right? The one thing that absolutely has to work correctly is your machine. So your body is your machine. It has to work so that you can enjoy life. Your machine has to work so that you can enjoy sewing. So there's a lot of things that I kind of twist in my head and relate the sewing into my real world life and helping people with just, silencing the negative thoughts.
Well, and the fact that you pull out when you're done the sense of accomplishment, right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
in that dark, hopeless space, that I can come and spend a couple of hours, and not only did I have something for myself, but now that I can give it to others, that's beautiful.
Right.
That's absolutely fabulous.
I
Thank
also
you.
think that for you in particular, that sewing has always been a part of your life. I would say more so than most people, given that your
Mm-hmm.
mom had a sewing room, sewed for others, sewed for your family. I imagine that there was a little bit of it that was a coming home. So not just coming back to Northwest Arkansas, but coming back to your roots and to
Mm-hmm.
that childhood activity that you enjoyed. And I feel like for a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but sewing has that place. I remember sewing with my mom when I was growing up, my mom being Angela. And I think that even just there's so many people that had that parent, that grandparent, somebody in their life who sewed, that it
Mm-hmm.
can have that real personal connection. And then it also is practical, that there is an element to it that you are
Mhm.
going to serve yourself, even if you're not maybe going to go all the way to the point of making your own clothes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn to repair clothes. You can learn to make things and create things. I think it hits so many boxes that it is
Mhm.
a practical skill. It is something that you can walk away with a finished product to be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in our work, particularly in our like mental health journeys, there's not like, woohoo, I get to walk away with this gold ribbon and
Mm-hmm.
I've accomplished this. There's your own milestones and your own recognizing, and then there's not like a finished moment. Uh,
Right. It
and
can
yeah,
it can give you that finished moment. And it's funny because I'll have new sewers come in and they're like, well, I'm not going to make a quilt or anything. And I'm like, oh,
I
that's a
know.
jelly roll. Let's do that. And they're like, what? Yeah, we're going to do that. You can do it. No, I can't. Yes, you can. And then they're like, look what
Mm,
I did. I can't believe it. And you get
yeah.
like this self satisfaction and gratification. And then, oh my goodness, I feel proud of myself.
Yes. Yeah, you got some dopamine hit, you got some oxytocin because there's the whole like family atmosphere, community atmosphere.
Mhm.
I remember it was a little bit like that when I did my just overcoming physical challenges. Like, oh, I don't think I could run a 5K.
Mhm.
And then I did it. And that sense of, I don't think I can bike to work. And then I did it. And like all of those things that especially when we're in our messy middle and it feels like everything is out of control, anything that you can do that then can start putting in those positive marbles to help build your self-confidence, to help build your self-esteem, to help give you some like dopamine and to help to release some of that cortisol, I think is beautiful and amazing. I was thinking back, Sammy, of trying to figure out how I started sewing because I don't have the story of it was my grandma and my mom. However, I don't even know how I decided this, but my senior year, I took home ec. I was like
I was gonna
president.
say it was home ec.
Well, but we didn't in my home ec. I was vice president my junior year. I was vice president of the Future Homemakers of America, which is just hilarious now. Anyway, I think that was it. Is that I didn't when I took home ec, we didn't have to sew. I don't remember which version I took. I took like the cooking version or whatever. Anyway, but I decided I wanted to make a dress. And my aunt's granny, she'd teach anybody to sew. And literally over spring break, she every day would come in the morning when she got up and she would like check my progress and she would teach me how to do the next thing. And then I would work that day and then she would go and she would come back down the mountain that next day anyway. And I think it was probably because I was in FHA that I wanted to have that skill set, but I didn't learn it in home ec. And now I'm sitting here going, oh, and I wore that dress to the FHA banquet. So maybe that was the impetus. But now when I talk to my cousins who that granny is their actual biological granny, they're super jealous that I got that experience with her, because they were like, oh, by the time we got that age, granny she wasn't able to, and she tried to help and stuff. So,
or when they were finally just ready in their heads to give it that attention and stuff. Yeah.
That's
Time is definitely the most valuable thing that we have. And it is the best gift we can ever give anybody. Right. So time's important. And when I was younger, I didn't, whatever, it takes forever for a year to go by. We know better now.
Yeah, we do. It's beautiful.
One last question that I want to sort of even expand on the time. When you are working with people in the sewing room, there's a lot of it that you talk about processing your trauma while sewing. How does that work? How do you help people with that? What does that look like?
Well, it's, I first start off with just distraction. What do you know about this machine? Let's talk. We'll talk. You're in here. And if people want to share with me their things when they come in here, of course, I'm going to listen. Of course I am. And then I'm going to be like, well, you want to do a project? You want to pick out some fabric? What do you want to make? Which machine would you like to use? Do you want to serge today? You want to try to do this? It's a little bit of distraction when they come in, and then to sit next to them while we're sewing, because our room here will hold about 10 people comfortably. And you don't even really have to say anything. You just listen, because everybody I have a relationship with has someone that's got some trauma, loss, or addiction in their life, right? And it may not be them, but it's somebody. And, it's all about distracting ourselves a little bit. Yeah.
Well, and I think that one of the things you had shared with me is that sometimes when you get that distraction, people will open up to the deeper, harder things when it's not. If I had to give 100% of my attention to putting a spotlight on what's happened to me, like that's terrifying. But if I I'm going to give my attention over here and then just give some airtime to this other thing going on, it can help to just make that a little bit easier, a little bit safer, and a little bit different. And I just think that the intentionality you bring to how you work with people and how you are teaching them, but also how you're giving them that safe space for accomplishment, to learn something, to make something.
Right.
It does so many things while feeling like we're just doing a project. It doesn't have to be like, here's your big trauma recovery plan and your steps to healing. It's just, we're just going to make something and have a good time.
Normalize it. Normalize those things. Because like I said, every one of us has somebody, if it isn't ourselves, right? So why do we not talk about it? Don't get me wrong. I don't want the harping and the that, but we can talk about it. I had a conversation with a lady at Joann's one day, and it was right after rehab, year or so. Um, and I don't even remember how we started talking, but I told her, I said, I don't go to AA. It depresses me. That's just me. AA's been around a really long time. It's great for people. But for me, it's depressing. I'd rather just talk to you about it. And by talking with her, there was somebody behind me. We finished our conversation. I got ready to walk away, and she looks at me and she goes, "That was awesome," and gave me a high five in Joann's. I'm like, I had no idea somebody else was listening. Um, but we're going to normalize it and let's just talk about it. And it doesn't have to always feel so intense, right? And the more we normalize it and the more we realize the people in our community and around us have some idea, it may be the same but different, different but the same kind of thing, to be able to relate each other. And it does kind of crack that ice and make people more willing to talk about things together, especially if they feel like they can relate with someone else about it.
I love that.
That's so beautiful. LaDawnya, do you have any, maybe, I don't know, advice or encouragement that you would give to somebody maybe who's in that dark place, maybe who's just out of it? I don't know. What would you like to leave people with today?
So if you think you have a problem, keep asking other people, ask for help. If you don't get help, go somewhere else and ask for help. Just keep asking. And really it comes down to, you can ask all you want, but until you do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I ended in a way. I asked for help for years and it was kind of like, because me have a problem? Come on. I put on a smiley face and cover it pretty well. If someone has a problem, I would just encourage them to listen to themselves. And whether you can afford it or not, doesn't really matter. If you have to go to a rehab and you have to file bankruptcy, you're going to walk away with your sobriety. And you're going to walk away with that accomplishment for your own self. I mean, when I filed bankruptcy, it was the worst feeling in my whole life. Like, I have always had credit. I may not have money, but I have credit, so I can still have these things that I want in my life. And just make the choice for yourself. Know that time is valuable. Being able to think for yourself is valuable, and just do it for yourself. Make that ultimate choice and be Indiana Jones. Just be Indiana Jones and have faith in yourself.
Take the first step.
I do have one other question. I always said that was the last one. What about for somebody who is watching their friend who needs to make the decision for themselves? So the supporter, the family member, the friend who sees their friend who has a problem. Do you have any advice you would give them?
That one's a little harder because,
It is.
I mean, I don't drink. My problem isn't other people's problems, right? My habit isn't other people's habits. I've lost a friend this year already to liver problems. So the ones that are still struggling, I just talk about myself. That's the only experience I have is my own. And I talk about if they say something that makes me think of something that happened to me, I try to share that with them, and encourage them that it's not always going to be no laughter. It's not always going to be that first step into the dark. It does get lighter. It gets brighter and less heavy, and we're worth it. We're worth, even if it costs all the money in the world, we're worth it to go and take care of ourselves so that we can be here to raise our family and have our, work and our life and the things that we enjoy. So focus on ourselves, do something good for ourselves. And it doesn't matter what the cost is, because you never know what you might find in that loss, right? You may never know what you find.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you, support what you're doing and the mission that you guys have, or have more conversations with you?
Absolutely. We have a website, lostozarkdawn.org. We're located at the Center for Nonprofits. That's at 1200 West Walnut in Rogers at the Old St. Mary's Hospital, which is fabulous. There are 89 different nonprofits in here for our community. So give it a Google and see what's in here. Our phone number is on our website. Just give us a call. Maybe you want some one-on-one instruction. We can do it. For the people who maybe sewing skipped a generation, and you don't know what to do with the sewing supplies. If you sell them, fantastic. If you have no idea, we're here. We're going to use those supplies to support Lost Ozark Dawn community heritage and our mission. We're going to use it for projects for our community and just give back and be the third place. Be that third place for people and just share our knowledge, share our talents, and hopefully Northwest Arkansas will be nice and warm, and we'll have lots of people that are confident in themselves, because it takes encouragement and takes time sometimes.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm also going to add people can donate to your nonprofit on your website. You have information there. And then you also have a business side of it as well, where you do sell some things. So
Yes.
if you're wanting to contribute financially, there are lots of ways. And I'm sure LaDawnya would not turn you down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do carry Isacord. One of the sewing centers closed down last year, and Isacord's an embroidery thread that a lot of the Bernina machine users like. So we do have that. They can buy new product from us. They can come in and buy thrift products from us at a discounted price, because we want it to be affordable so people can do it. When I started sewing, I got to pick up scraps that were on the floor. I got the old towels. And like I said, there's will, there's way.
It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys, everyone, for listening. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you ever want to share with us, you can email us. You can also send us a text message now at the link in the show notes. So go try that out so we can see what that looks like. I don't know. Why not? But until next time, we're so grateful for each and every one of you who listens and supports us. And we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.